use of those images and sound recordings. Can I please request that when councillors and members of the public are speaking, not to disclose any personal information of an individual, as this might infringe the rights of that individual and breach data protection rules. This is a formal town council meeting and members of the public will be given the opportunity to speak during public open sessions, but will not be permitted to speak at other times. So we have apologies for absence from councillors Leslie Fage and Woodhead, and we have Councillor Mark Foster joining us on Zoom. Do I have any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Alban?
Yeah, it's on non-pecuniary on 11F.
Which one?
11F.
11F, thank you. Any other interests? Councillor Brown?
Non-pecuniary 11E.
11E.
Non-pecuniary, but I don't want to take part in planning applications in any case, but there's obviously one quite close to me. That's how I don't pass comment on.
Okay, thank you. Now, I don't have any of my normal town mayor's announcements, but colleagues have suggested that we might try running a council meeting without councillors actually standing to speak. I wonder whether somebody would like to propose that we lift that particular standing order for this meeting only and see how we go. Okay, to not stand when speaking in the council meeting. Those in favour, please. Those against? Okay, thank you. So we'll try it for this meeting. Right, public open session. I don't think we have any members of the public apart from Mr. Reynolds. Would you like to speak, please? Would you mind using the microphone, because we do struggle to hear otherwise.
Good evening, councillors. I'd like to make some comments on item 11D, the land to the east of Saxon Drive. Firstly, it seems like a bit of deja vu, because I remember this being discussed about 2 years ago. So presumably it's come back as a formal application. Is it the same? Has it got larger?
It's the same application because it was actually awarded 5 years ago and the permission has lapsed.
Yes, okay. The second thing is, I presume we're talking about the Mill Lane site. So if that is so, can I ask who has raised this application? Is it Central Beds? Is it being funded by Central Beds?
I understand it's an application from the Harris family.
Okay.
Yeah.
And finally, my final question is, when the travel people have moved off the site, what are we going to do with the land? Because I would like to see it revert to recreational ground.
This isn't the moving off of the Mill Lane site to that site. It's an additional site.
Right.
But we did talk at the last town council meeting about limiting, and they've overstepped their planning permission on the Mill Lane site. So Central Beds have proposed an enforcement notice, but it's been appealed against. So we have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way we can say we approve this provided the land is, because we're so short of recreation areas in Biggleswade for a town of 25,000. And you can imagine the developers are circling around it already.
I think we all agree with you, but we can only do what we can do within planning rules. But we did support Central Beds in keeping the Mill Lane site to a reasonable size. But some of the family now want to move to this other site.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Right, well, I'm pleased to welcome Joe Hanson-Cole from Midbeds Citizens Advice, who's going to talk to us about what Citizens Advice are doing and how you've helped people in Biggleswade. Over to you, Joe.
Okay, thank you. I understand that some slides are going to be put up for me, hopefully. If there is a problem, that's fine. I do have some paper backup. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, in the bottom right-hand corner, there should be a slideshow option. If you press that, it should work.
Okay.
Okay, so my name's Jo Hanson-Cole. I'm the Chief Officer for Citizens Advice Mid Bedfordshire. I took over, I think just going back to September of last year, so I'm relatively new, but hoping to make some headway. Next slide, please. I just thought it would be useful to put on here just a reminder of what the aims are for Citizens Advice. So we've got two main aims. One is that we aim to give people the knowledge and confidence they need to find their way forward, whoever they are and whatever their problem. And then the second part is really around policy, where we aim to improve policies and practices that affect people's lives. Our service is always free, confidential, independent and impartial. Next slide, please. So I was asked to sort of present what our service has been doing, and specifically in Biggleswade, and that's over the last 2 years. As with every organisation, we had to change and amend our service very quickly and very swiftly to deal with the coronavirus. So as everyone did in March 2020, we went from being a face-to-face service and telephone overnight to telephone, remote working and access through the website. That was made possible by an absolutely amazing, dedicated team of volunteers and some paid staff. So the key services that we've provided over the last 2 years are what we call general advice. Now, general advice covers the areas that you can see here. It's a very broad area: benefits, employment, housing, consumer, family law, courts, immigration and health. And realistically, anything that a client wants to come towards will either help with or we will signpost forward. We're also part of a nationally funded project called Universal Credit Help to Claim. And this is about supporting clients up to their first successful payment of universal credit. We have a specific outreach project which helps our vulnerable members of our community. Now, this is predominantly where we go out and visit clients. But obviously during COVID that was unable to happen, but through technology and some ingenious workarounds of collecting paperwork from people's houses, etc., we managed to carry on that service successfully. And then finally in 2021, we're part of a debt project which has helped us to deal with debt issues with the main vulnerable clients within this area. So moving on to the next slide. So this gives us really the key detail and the bulk of what I'll talk around now about what exactly we've been doing with the Biggleswade clients. So if you orientate yourself to the top left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see that's where I've got listed the number of clients that we've seen. So in the last 2 years, we've seen individual clients of 649. And just for reference, in the whole of Mid-Beds, we saw 4,358. Biggleswade is our biggest area where we see the most clients, followed by Sandy, Flitwick, Arlesey, and then Ampthill. When we see a client, they generally come to us with a number of issues, not just one issue. It's normally multiple issues. So if you look, you see we have 649 clients, of which we had dealt with 2,551 issues. And the activities below that is related purely to how we spoke to them. So whether we spoke to them on the phone, whether we dealt with them on web chat, or whether we dealt with them on emails and that sort of thing. So not web chat or online form, we don't do web chat. So those are the key ones. There's an income gain there, which indicates a potential income gain that we have either gained or secured for clients in the region of £150,000. I believe that to be an underestimation, just purely based on how we record data. We don't have a very comprehensive way to record gain, short of contacting clients and getting information from them, we don't think is practical. So moving across to the middle part of the page, you can see we've got the list of issues. Now, the top 6 issues remain consistent within Biggleswade as they have remained in the whole of Mid-Beds. The only issue that we saw a significant change in was employment in 2020, which I would have expected to see especially around all the issues that the clients had in relation to furlough. But generally, the mix has been the same, and it's the same here as it is everywhere else and potentially in the rest of the country. And those key issues are around benefits, relationships and family, housing, employment, and debt. Moving further around the screen, you can see the age profile that we've seen. So again, the age profile over the last 2 years has been similar to pre-pandemic. We generally see the majority of clients sort of between the 25 to 45 range. The clients, they tend to taper down into the older age ranges. The gender split, as you can see, is 60-40. So there's a bit of a higher gender split towards women than there are men. But again, that has been consistent and hasn't been affected by COVID in any way. The following one down the right-hand side has got information on disabilities and long-term health conditions. So that just shows the proportion of clients that we see who have those conditions, and the split of ethnicity, which is broadly in line with the census information that we have in our area. The bit that you can't see is just some further detail into those particular areas. So that's a summary of the sort of what and who we've seen. Is there any sort of further detail you'd like me to go into on that data, or any other comparison to any other areas?
I'd appreciate if you take the odd question from councillors afterwards, and then we can dive into things in more detail that councillors would like to hear. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, I didn't have any more slides after this. I've got data that I can answer questions to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll jump in with a question. Thanks very much for coming. Sorry, I forgot to switch that on for those watching online. So thank you for coming this evening. So I guess my first question is, how well matched is your capacity to your workload? So typically, how long might a client have to wait to get an appointment? And I guess my second question is, what could the town council do to support what you do? Apart from a small amount of funding, what else is that we could do to help? Thank you.
So depending on demand and depending on exactly within the time of year, it's approximately 3 to 5 days from contact to either appointment or initial callback. The way that we work within our organisation is people can call into us and leave a message or speak to receptionists. They then will have after that we'll have a triage call that will assess the severity of their issue. If it's urgent, they'll be seen quickly. If it's non-urgent, then we'll get to that client within about 3 to 5 working days. The next part of your question was how does our capacity fit with that? Well, there's always opportunity to have more capacity, but that's driven by volunteers being able to support us. But our biggest constraining factor at the moment, specifically in Biggleswade, is our premises. Our premises is small and is not able to be made COVID secure, so we can't do face-to-face appointments at the moment. So any opportunity around premises is something where Biggleswade could or may help us. We have been working with CBC, but there's no opportunity at the moment.
Other questions, anybody? Yes.
I was interested when you started to talk about volumes of clients.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, is 649 clients, or is that sessions? Individual clients?
That's individual clients that we have seen from Biggleswade over the 2 years. And the split is about 356, 58 each year.
Okay. Anything else, colleagues? Councillor Fage.
Just firstly, thank you for your presentation. Very, very interesting. So when you see a client initially for the first time, what does the life cycle of that client tend to look like for the average person, should we say? Are they people who come back time and time again with different issues, or do some require various touch points with the same issue over a long period of time, or is it simply one session and sorted? I presume it's a mix.
Yes, so the answer is very much all of those. But if I was to generalise, especially relating to debt, so our debt clients, it's a sort of iterative service. It's more like a casework service, so we would see our clients more. Our outreach service, again, is similar because we're dealing with vulnerable clients that need extra support, so we would generally see those clients more. Then some people may come to us with an issue and it's just one contact where they're assessed. We might signpost them to our website and that gives them enough information, or they might need something like a benefit check where they would go to a full advisor and they would go through the benefits they may be entitled to. So it can be anything from one contact to multiple contacts, depending on the complexity of it and depending on how much support the client needs to help move forward.
Councillor Ramsey.
Good evening. Can you tell me to what extent you liaise with our community agent, please?
So I personally haven't liaised with your community agent. I don't know if anyone does in our organisation. So it's by your community agent.
So, sorry, are you saying that because you need to be impartial, you don't get involved? Because we have a community agent that advises people on benefits that are available and visits people in their own homes. I didn't know if that overlapped with what you do.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of the community agent, but that doesn't mean they're not aware within my organisation. So if the community agent needed, we could either refer to them or they could refer to us. There would be no crossover in impartiality.
Maybe that's the way we can help, by just making that connection, because the community agent is employed by Bedfordshire Rural Communities Charity.
Okay.
And works within Biggleswade. So we can make that connection for you.
Yeah, it may be that connection is known, it's just I may not know about it.
Okay. No, because I appreciate you're new to the patch.
Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
Good evening. Based on the figures you're giving, 1 in 7 of your clients are from, approximately 1 in 7 from Biggleswade.
Yeah. Just doing the maths in my head very quickly.
600 over 4,000.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, is that a similar proportion to the rest of the county?
So just looking at the rest of the county, I've got some figures here. So in the same 2 years, Sandy was 350, Flitwick 339, Alsey 307, Amptill 323. So quite significantly lower.
I'm just wondering if any councillor knows the population. When you say the county, you're not including Luton and Bedford?
Sorry?
You're not including Luton and Bedford?
No, this is just mid-Bedfordshire.
Just mid-Bedfordshire. Does anyone know the population of mid-Bedfordshire? Just wondering if we're out of proportion.
We're the largest place in mid-Bedfordshire, apart from on the other side, Leighton Buzzard, Houghton Regis.
Yeah, and that's not included in
Dunstable.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just wondering whether there was a problem, as it were, in Biggleswade, but from the figures, no, you're not suggesting that. Thanks.
Councillor Fage.
Yeah, so just following on from that, I guess, and I presume some of this is confidential, but something that certainly I'd be curious to find out a little bit more about is whether there are particular parts of Biggleswade, given that it's quite a large town, covers there are a couple of council wards here, whether there are pockets of Biggleswade that are perhaps more dependent on your service than others. I appreciate that's not perhaps something we can go into in a public meeting, but I think that's something we'd be interested in when we look at which parts of our town we want to focus on and make better, because my guess is that those who it is a guess that those who perhaps are a little more reliant on your services might be those who we could help out a little bit more in the areas in which they live.
Yeah, that's certainly information that we can look into, and obviously making sure we maintain client confidentiality.
Councillor Knight.
Thank you. You mentioned volunteers. I just wondered, do you have enough volunteers? Are you looking for more volunteers? And if you are, what sort of time commitment would it be if we knew anyone that might be interested? So at the moment, we've got a sort of running total of about 30 volunteers. We'll be looking to recruit some more, potentially looking at the new financial year. The time commitment we like from volunteers is to be able to volunteer for a minimum of 2 days a week. It's not 2 full days. We run the service from 9:30 till 3:30, so it's generally being available within those times. We're looking to ensure that we carry on providing an option where volunteers can work from home if they would prefer to do so, but they can also then come into an office environment, and then when we go back to doing face-to-face, they can see clients face-to-face as well.
And what training do you give volunteers?
So we give the volunteers an incredibly comprehensive set of training, and it can take anything from 6 to 9 months to fully train to be able to become an advisor. So they're supported by a dedicated trainer within our organisation, and we offer a very comprehensive programme of online training and support. We then offer observations with our existing volunteers, and then assessed and observed sessions to support them with their journey to becoming an advisor.
Thank you. Anything else, anybody? Thank you very much, Joe, for coming along this evening.
Thank you for
Very
inviting me.
interesting. And I think one of the officers will be in touch with you to give you the community agent details offline, so to speak. And as I said to you before the meeting, we don't require you to sit through the rest of the meeting unless you really want to.
Yeah, and just to add on that point, if there are any other statistics or further information you think would be valuable to any of your sessions, then I'm happy to look at pulling that together to help and support you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, very much appreciated. Right, moving on, are there any members' questions, please? Councillor Strawn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure, like other members, I'm getting members of the public approaching me about the service being offered by the doctor's surgeries in town. Now, I recollect that we were inviting the practice managers to the council to explain the situation. Have we had any progress on that, please? And I think it would help considerably if at least we could have some transparency from the practices as to their difficulties, which may not necessarily alleviate the concerns of the public, but at least explain to them some of the difficulties, because there's certainly a great difficulty making contact with them. And I've heard it commented that people are being sent to A&E rather than to the doctors. This isn't an acceptable situation, in my opinion. So what is the current situation there? And I do note that it was possibly raised at the Biggleswade Joint Management Committee meeting last week.
Mm-hmm. If you'd like to come to the table so that you can use the microphone. And Councillor Strawn's question about have we made any progress with the doctor's surgeries, please?
Thank you. I can confirm that we have written out, as I articulated at the Joint Committee recently, we've written out on 2 occasions to both surgeries, and on the second occasion we included the clinical care group in that communique, inviting them to us to have a session, helpful session perhaps, where we could sort of discuss the how we can assist them with reducing patient waiting times for appointments. We have not received a response yet for that second invitation, which happened from either surgery on this occasion. So that's where we're at in terms of the current situation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other members' questions, please? Okay, I'm moving on. We're now on to the minutes of meetings and the minutes of our meeting on the 11th of January. So if I can go through for accuracy, please. We're on page 5 of the pack. Anything on page 5? Page 6? Page 7? Councillor Strawn.
Yes, at the top of page 7, second paragraph, my name is mentioned. And on the second line, it says these are based in Bedfordshire. I think I said use central Bedfordshire, which is rather ties in with the end of that first set line. So I think the word central should be added to that line, please.
Okay, so it's central Bedfordshire. Yeah, thank you. Anything else on page 7, colleagues? Page 8. Councillor Strawn again.
Yes, I'm afraid this is a spelling error under item C, third paragraph, last sentence. It was suggested. It's suggested. I think I've never heard of what suggested is, but I think there should be an S in there.
It's what we do to pedants, you know. Okay. Anything else on page 8? Page 9? Page 10? Page 11? Or page 12? So may I sign them as a correct record, colleagues, please? Thank you. So we now have the minutes of the Fngp meeting. There are recommendations from those minutes, but we have a separate item on the agenda. But could I just ask Councillor Pullinger if he wants to say anything in general about the minutes?
Not really, no. I'd just ask members to note them prior to them being formally approved at the next Fngp meeting. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions at this point? No. Okay, thank you very much. So matters arising from the minutes of our meeting on the 11th of January. Anything on page 5? Page 6? Page 7? Page 8? Page 9? Page 10? Page 11? Page 12? So no matters arising on those minutes. I'm looking at the screen and we don't seem to have Mr. Chapman in the meeting yet. Is he about to come in? Thank you. Okay, so I'm now moving on to items for consideration. And the first one is the submission version of the neighbourhood plan. So this is the version that if you approve it tonight will go into central beds, and central beds will take the process forward. I'm very pleased to welcome Dave Chapman to the meeting. Good evening, Dave.
Hi there.
I think you'd like to say a few words of introduction before we move on to any discussion, please.
Yeah, this is to agree the submission of the neighbourhood plan to the local planning authority. So the plan is submitted and the local authority will publicise the fact the plan is submitted. They'll organise for an independent examination to take place, which will consider whether the plan meets legal requirements, and you know, once the plan has gone through that process, then the local authority would arrange a referendum. So at this point, when you submit the plan, it will pass to the control of the local planning authority, and you know, they will organise examination and then referendum. So the version of the plan you have follows on from your consultation, the Regulation 14 consultation, and modifications were made to the plan as a consequence of representations made through that consultation. So what you have in front of you is basically the plan to be submitted.
And also councillors have a copy of the consultation statement, so colleagues have been able to look and see what comments we had and how we've responded to that. And I think I'm right, Dave, that goes into central beds as well and onto the planning inspector.
Yeah, the consultation statement, and there's a basic condition statement as well, which explains how the plan meets legal requirements. They will both have to be submitted with the plan.
Okay, thank you.
I hope you can hear okay. I'm speaking from a hotel room, so I'm hoping the IT's standing up.
It's all right, we can hear you, it's fine. And I appreciate that you've dialed into us, so to speak. So colleagues, it's over to you, whether you've got any questions or comments or what you feel about the submission version and the consultation statement. Councillor Fage.
Yep, thank you, Dave, and welcome, and thank you for explaining sort of the next steps of the process. We've been through quite a long consultation, the Regulation 14. So there were various comments from members of the public. How did we fare in terms of consultation compared to other neighbourhood plans that you've been involved in? And are we in a good position, having received good feedback from our residents, sort of relative to what you'd expect to see and other neighbourhood plans that you might have been involved in?
Well, it was probably fairly typical, I think, and as there had been an earlier engagement process that allows you to sort a lot of things out before the formal consultation. So I would say it was fairly typical, and I think also the representations, there was mainly they were about, you know, making certain changes to the plan, but there was very little sort of fundamental objection in there. So fairly typical, I'd say.
And again, yeah.
I'd like to make a proposal then, please, that this is the version of the plan that we put forward to that we submit to Central Bedfordshire Council to take forward with the remainder of the process related to the neighbourhood plan. So I'd like to propose that, please, and also a formal thank you to the neighbourhood plan steering group and to the staff who have worked tirelessly over goodness knows how many years now, 3.5, 4 years, through ups and downs of the neighbourhood plan and getting it to a stage where it's now ready to be discussed by the planning professionals at Central Bedfordshire and relevant inspectors as well.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. Any other comments, please? Okay, so all those in favour of submitting the neighbourhood plan? That's unanimous, I think. I can't see Councillor Foster, but anyway, that's not an issue. Thank you very much for supporting that. And as Councillor Fage said, it's been a 3.5-year process so far. It'll be 4 years by the time we get to a referendum. And I'd particularly like to thank Councillor Strachan, Councillor North and Councillor Bond, who have attended all of the strategy group meetings along with the other members of the strategy group. And I'd like to also thank Helen Calvert, who has done all the notes and all the prodding and all the Gantt charts and all the rest of it. And as well as thanking Dave very much and John Baldwin, who did some project management for us. So Dave, if you're speaking to John, could you pass that thanks on, please, to him?
Yeah, will do, yeah.
So thank you very much, Dave. It's going forward. We'll see what happens.
Okay, thanks.
We'll leave you to whatever you're preparing in the hotel room for tomorrow's meetings.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you. Yes, of course.
I think we, the council, also to recognise the efforts that you've put in as chairman of this group, the amount of time that you've actually spent on dealing with it, whilst I'm pleased to say I was part of the group. Without your leadership and the input of yours, we would not be where we are today. So I think we ought to thank you as much as anybody else because your effort has been tremendous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I didn't expect that. Okay, moving on the agenda. The next item is CBC Housing Allocation Scheme. And we deferred this from last time. We had 2 points that we wished to make, but it was deferred to see if anybody has any other points, having looked more closely at the consultation. So can I ask if there are any other points, please? Nobody wants to comment?
I haven't.
Sorry,
That's
Councillor
okay.
Page.
I mean, have we simply just said already that we're broadly supportive? I think if there's nothing more to add, I think we can potentially leave it at that. But make sure that response is submitted to Central Bedfordshire, because I know that they extended the consultation for us to have our say. So as long as we make sure that has gone in, I think most of us were very impressed with the themes that Charlotte Coney was talking about last time when she came to speak to us. She clearly knows her stuff and presented a very logical case for why they're making the changes that they are. So I think we should throw our weight behind this.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? So I think we need to write a letter, not just in general support, but saying that actually we were very impressed by what's going on and very much supportive of what they're trying to do, without any specific comments. Is that all right? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. We've got our meeting dates for 2022-23 in front of us. Did you wish to come and introduce it, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'll be very, very brief. I mean, the programme is presented based upon custom and practice from previous years, incorporating a minimum of 4 committee meetings, Fngp slightly more because of the financial cycle. I don't really want to say any more about it, Madam Mayor, because there's nothing, I think, there which is not self-explanatory, but commend it to members for acceptance, please.
Thank you. Comments, please. Councillor Fage?
Firstly, thank you for this. My only observation, I recall we discussed meeting dates up to the end of the year up to April 2022. We discussed that a few months ago, I think. And one thing that I think we were keen to see was just a little bit of a easing off in August, if possible, to have a sort of natural, not pause for summer as such, but recognising that it's a time when perhaps more staff are on holidays. So my only thought was whether we need maybe quite so many personnel committee meetings in the year and maybe moving town centre management up into July. But that was my only thought. I appreciate I'm throwing that on at the 11th hour, so please feel free to shut me down if that's talking out of turn.
Thank you. Yes.
Councillor Woodhead would say this, I'm sure, if he was able to be here tonight, but effectively we've done something slightly different with personnel. Those meetings are in the calendar. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will take place. So it's conditional upon work being required to put through the committee at the time. It may be that nearer the time that we talk to the chair of the personnel committee and that he decides or recommends not to hold those meetings. So they're conditional on the workflow.
I don't know whether you've got any comments, Councillor Knight, about moving TCM to perhaps the 19th of July.
I'd be happy to go with the majority if there's a sense the 19th of July would be better.
That gives us just the council meetings in August so that we can deal with planning and that. So with that change, the town centre management going up to the 19th of July, are we happy to accept these dates for the next year? Yes?
Move it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, accounts and the budget for 22-23. This is the recommendation from Fngp. So can I ask first if the clerk would like to say anything in introduction?
Thank you. I'll try and keep my comments minimal, but maybe just for a few minutes if I could just set the scene, if that's okay. Firstly, I'm reminded that that we need to communicate the decision of the council to central beds by 12 o'clock this evening. Whatever decision you make this evening, one will be in contact with them to communicate the outcome of that deliberation. So I'm introducing this paper really as the RFO and just trying to highlight some issues that I remain concerned connected to. One of the conversations that we had at Finance and General Purposes was the hope and expectation that officers can conclude the efficiency and cost reduction project and can identify £25,000 worth of savings, which would then enable us to set a lower percentage connected to the new year. This is a hope and an expectation. I've tasked the finance team to go away and do this, and we will look at every single vote heading, every single opportunity to try and reduce our costs and to try and make ourselves more efficient. And we will also review all of the contracts that we currently have with any external bodies connected to the council. The only thing I would say connected to that, the work has started. It will be finished by the end of March. I have no absolute sense at this point in time about what figure can be delivered. I would hope it's 25, but I can't guarantee it's 25. So it's an indicative figure at best, and obviously has been prescribed to enable us to try and keep the percentage slightly lower than the conversations that we'd had before. The other thing I would highlight is that as much as we've had member guidance connected to that element of unplanned expenditure, or what I call growth, to a bare minimum, there are some issues that I think are bordering on the mandatory that will hit us in the new financial year. So even if we don't make allowance for this within any agreed precept, I think it's likely that there will be expenditure associated with it. The consequence of that effectively will be, we will try obviously to manage within our cost envelope, but one consequence could be that we actually effectively move into an overspend situation for the brand new financial year starting on the 1st of April. So if I just highlight a couple of those issues as RFO that I still am concerned about. One of the key things that we've got going at the moment is that we are looking at and revising and reflecting on our fire precautions across all of our capital landscape. We have money built into the budget, which reflects the actual work itself, but we don't currently have money built in for the consequences of finding whatever we find. We have an indicative figure associated with that, which I won't talk about at council this evening. The other issues of concern for me are that I think we should play our part as a partner in protecting our community when we have flood-related activity. We do have what I would call some basic equipment. There is some provision in our growth elements connected to making this even better. I'd like to think that we can try and make that commitment if we possibly can. If we do that, it will impact on our projected outturn. And another couple of issues before I come to a stop. Again, we've invested quite significantly in our public realm offer. However, there are still issues connected to equipment that we need to refresh. I'd like to be in a position to be able to do that going forward into the new financial year. So I won't overplay that in a sense, but my main concern here is that there is still remaining elements of, I would call it kind of mandatory growth that could impact on surface provision, that if we don't agree and take that into consideration, will impact on the new year budget. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Pullinger, there's a recommendation from Fngp. Would you like to introduce it, please?
Yes, thank you. So I think there's the report in front of you from the Head of Finance and Planning, and the recommendations that there come from Fngp. So I think we went through quite a lot of discussions, both through the informal workshop and through the F&G committee meeting itself, looking at the options. And from the informal workshop, those that attended indicated that we would, based on the information that was provided to us then, would look for a precept increase of no more than 7.5% if possible. When it came to the Fngp meeting last week, we had essentially two options presented to us. One was for a 9.25% increase, and the other was for a 7.5% increase, which would have eaten into some of our reserves over and above what our reserve policy is in our non-allocated reserves, but reserves that nevertheless, in the future at least, are likely to have some call upon them. So as a result of that, the proposal that was made and then ultimately adopted by Fngp was that we should formalise a task against the cost reduction and efficiency review. Originally, when the precept was set for this current financial year, there was a resolution of council that would have been done within this financial year, and in order to be in place ready for this funding cycle. That hasn't been delivered as yet, but we felt as a committee that instead of saying that we're going to go into reserves, we need to formalise the fact that we have an expectation that we will reduce costs through that review, and that we effectively are tasking the clerk to deliver that £25,000 saving to mitigate the need to eat into any reserves next year. So the recommendations are as in the paper, that we set the precept at £1,424,171, which translates into an increase of 7.5% for a Band E property. That the relevant growth lines which were discussed and were included in the papers last week in the proposal are included in the budgets. That we draw down the relevant amount of a public works loan during the course of next year as indicated by that growth budget. That we have the £25,000 target for delivery for that cost reduction and efficiency review. And the final one was around the, because primarily due to the timings of when certain staff came on board in this process, there hasn't been an opportunity for each of the individual committees to scrutinise the proposed budgets in detail. So the final recommendation is that all of the committees have an opportunity to refine their budgets within the cost envelope determined as required. So I formally propose adoption of those recommendations.
Thank you. And as a recommendation from Fngp, it doesn't need any further proposing or seconding. Councillor Foster, you were indicating.
Yeah, was it not the case that the town clerk, the RFO, actually recommended the 9.25%? I can't see this anywhere within the paperwork. And is it not the case that the committee have actually gone against the recommendation of the town clerk?
I think that's true in that there was a recommendation in the previous papers that it should be the 9.25, yes. 9.25, yeah. Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that they feel the need, well, the committee feel the need to hold the precept down to 7.5%. But like most people around here, I have an accounts background and have worked a long time in accounts and one way and another. And I cannot agree to a precept that is using up savings in advance. I'm quite clear they honestly feel these savings can be made, and I'm not saying they're misleading anybody or anything like that. But we all know in our own lives, managing our own personal finances, that we think to ourselves, if I put this much by every month, then in 6 months' time, I'll have X amount in the bank and I'll be doing this and I'll be doing that. And what happens during that 6 months? Events turn up, expenses turn up, things beyond our control. And we find at the end of that 6 months, we hardly saved half of what we thought we would. And this is what happens. You cannot base a budget or a precept on savings that you think you can make, because they may not be able to be made. Events might happen, circumstances might change. And I do not agree with pulling down the reserves. Let's make these savings, let's show we can make these savings, and then they will benefit next year's precept. But I do not agree with trying to use savings, potential savings, not actual savings, potential savings in advance, particularly as our RFO has pointed out that there will be a change in circumstances and that there will be other expenses. And I do think we should consider the other option. I don't know if I'm allowed at this point to propose the other option, but I think we should consider it. And I don't think we should take this one forward. Thank you.
Okay, well, the rules of running the meeting mean that we have to vote on the Fngp proposal before we can take any other proposals. Other comments, colleagues? Councillor North.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I have to say that I agree very much with Councillor Ramsey, the sentiment. I think there is I mean, nobody can predict the future, but we are looking at uncertainties, particularly in relation to our expenditure. I don't think our management structure, our organisational structure is fixed and firm at the present time. There will be things, we're not doing anything in this budget to strengthen our reserve position. There will be things that crop up unexpectedly, such as roof repairs that the town clerk showed me a few days ago. We need to maintain a reserve for the sake of good practice and following proper guidelines, and for practical purposes of the uncertainty in our expenditure side. But if we do take this, we need to be sure, if we do follow this line, and accept there's a real risk that we will find that we run a deficit this year. We need a big increase in the precept next year to restore the solvency, well, not solvency, but restore the balance of the budget and to replenish reserves. We do need to be very careful. If this is agreed upon by town councillors, then we do need to be very careful. And so when people come up, you know, in 6 months' time with a bright idea, let's do this in the town square, this is a great idea, great project, it's only going to cost us £2,000, we have to say no. We have to refuse to do anything that's not in the current budget as far as is possible, unless it is an absolute emergency, such as flooding of the council chamber, for example, that we have seen. And so I will not be voting in favour of it, along with Councillor Ramsey, and I agree, and that's really all I have to say.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Knight.
Thank you. So I think we may have to make tough decisions. You know, we know there are inflationary pressures on the cost of living. I think it's really important that we strive to minimise the council tax burden on residents who are going to be struggling to pay their fuel bills this year, I expect. And I think that means we do have to look very hard at cost savings. We've already asked the town clerk some time ago now to look at cost savings. And I think we have to think about every pound, not just the increase, but every pound we take of the approximate £1.4 million and ask ourselves, are we confident every pound is being spent as well as it possibly can be? Not just look at the percentage increase, but look at that overall budget. So that request to look at cost and efficiency savings is not a new request. It sounds like we're expecting it to report back in March. The absolute worst case is we eat into reserves, which are very healthy. That's the absolute worst case. I'm very confident, bearing in mind that central beds have indicated they have got 2% of savings. We can find 1.5%. As I say, we may have to make some tough choices. But I think it's important that we do that, especially this time of year when we know so many residents are going to be struggling.
Thank you. Councillor Fage.
The town has grown enormously over the last, even in my time on council, in the last 4.5 years, nearly 5 years now, actually. And the amount that we as a council have had to spend in order to keep up with that growth has been quite significant as well. Our ambitions for the town are very high, and that's come at a cost. But we have to be clear, and we have to ask ourselves, have the previous precept increases been as targeted as intended? I think they have been. However, over time, I don't think, and I say this as a relatively new member of the council compared to others who have more experience, whilst we have put up the precept a lot and it was the right thing to do, I don't think we've ever found any savings really tried to. I'm sure there are areas where we have small amounts, but I think now is the time to have some laser focus on that. Otherwise, we'll be sat here next year having the same conversation. So I'll be voting for the 7.5%. It's a difficult decision. And I totally respect those who don't share that view. But I think now is the time to start to try to get it to a reasonable level, get this organisation to the right size, and then grow from there.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
I would like to be sitting here this time next year, pleased that we have made the savings and being able to pass the benefit on without damaging our reserves. You've already mentioned about inflation. I mean, it's usual to compare with Band D, but I think the difference between the two options is probably negligible in pence per week for Band D. So I don't see that would damage people's finances that much. However, if we aren't able to make the savings, if we do come across with inflation, if we do have other things to spend about, then next year we will be having to talk about increasing the precept by even more. We brought it down a little bit. I would like it now to wait and see how much we can bring it down for next year. I really don't think we should be using savings in advance like this. It never works. It's always a hiccup. And then we're in danger of being accused of misleading people and misleading the public and the council, which is not right, because that's not what we're doing. And I'm sure people do honestly believe that those savings can be made. But until we actually see those savings, in black and white, it's not right to say that we would be able to use them, because we really do not know how much savings we will have to be able to use, and we do not know what else is liable to crop up in the next 12 months, apart from the things that the RFO has already mentioned. I do think we should go for the other option, and I'm happy to propose that after we've voted on this one, obviously, but I don't think we can accept, as it stands, 7.5% using our reserves and using savings in advance. I do not think it's good financial policy.
Thank you. Mr. Tarrant.
Thank you. So I think there's just a number of quick observations. Number one, my history in local government has been as a transformation director, and I'm very familiar with reflecting on opportunities for efficiency and cost reduction. However, I'm not saying at this point in time whether the figure of 25k can or can't be delivered. If you reflect on the Central Bedfordshire comment, which one of our members just mentioned, they are taking monies out of a global opportunity of 468 million just in their revenue budget alone. They also have a fund of another 240 million in capital. So the opportunity to make cuts and efficiency savings it's never easy, it's never straightforward, but the overall quantum is multiples compared to us with a budget of 1.3, 1.4 million, which, even when you're looking at sort of managing your own personal finances, the less money involved becomes slightly more challenging and more interesting. Having said that, the problem is more than potential and a potential efficiency target. It is what I've said to you before, which is we have unplanned expenditure. We have growth. There are things that we are trying to achieve as a council which are currently not factored into the budget. And it's those things that concern me most, connected to what impact that will have if we are required to do them in the new year. And one last comment I would make, the difference between the two options is 6p a week. One is based at 30p per week, one is based at 24p per week. So there's the difference between the two. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to comment before I ask Councillor Pullinger to draw the debate to a close? Councillor Strawn.
I think this is difficult. Inflation has been going up, but we're fortunate not to be capped as a council. Other councils are capped. It is not our money, it is the town people's money. We are there to represent the town. The town were not happy last year at the increase and percentage increase. I wasn't, but I went with it on the advice and recommendation of the responsible financial officer. This year, I feel that 7.5% is the maximum, in fairness, that we should be doing. It's higher than I would wish. I think that we as a council have an obligation to the members of the public who we represent is to look for those savings. It's all very well saying ifs and maybes. We may get more income than we're anticipating. It can work both ways, but we have got to be brutal. We've now got the resources in-house, I think, in our finance team to actually achieve the savings by better management. And I think we've got to look at those. We've had a new regime in place, and that new regime has got the capabilities of actually achieving these savings. So yes, it may only be a few pence a week, but for the people on minimum wage and minimum income, it is a lot. And therefore, 7.5% to my mind is too high. I was unhappy that we were going that high last week, quite frankly, but looking at inflation, I think we've got to go to that level, and we have reserves. The reserves are there for a purpose. They're not just there for safety net purposes. They're there for a reason. It's the town people's money. Yes, we've got to keep adequate reserves to cover all eventualities. And at the moment, I believe we have adequate reserves and we'll have adequate reserves. We've got to cut our cloth according to our means. And if that means we have to make one or two decisions to cut things we would like to do, we have to do it. We've got to live in the real world and not just say that we can take the money out of the public's pockets without considering it. So I'm fully supportive of the Finance and General Purposes Committee's resolution. It's higher than I would like, but I think that we've got to do that this year, and we've got to make damn sure that next year we can deliver a lower increase than we've offered this year. And I'm sure it can be done if we approach it in the right manner and the committees go through their budgets fully and really work on it with the officers.
Thank you. I'm not getting any other indications, so Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. So there's a few
Sorry. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah.
You signalled just in time. Sorry, Councillor.
Yes, I was waiting for Councillor Strawn to finish. I fully agree with Councillor Strawn. I think if we haven't had, we've done well during the pandemic. We've had 2 years of pandemic. I dread to think we have anything worse than that the next 2 years or next year. So I would rather think we could probably manage, as he said, and I think 7.5% is too high still, but inflation is predicted to be 5%, so we're stuck with it. But I would definitely not be happy with 9.5%. I'm not too high, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. So there's a few points that have been raised that I'd like to address. I'd like to start with the reserves. So we as a council have a reserves policy. Our reserves policy is that we hold a general reserve of 3 months of net expenditure. We hold that reserve. That is in line with the NALP guidance in terms of the level. NALP guidance also says that any other reserves should be allocated. We currently have an additional reserve of approximately, or forecast at the end of this financial year to be approximately £73,500, which is unallocated. So I am not suggesting, or the Fngp committee are not suggesting that we aim to eat into that unallocated reserve. The worst case in terms of if the savings aren't delivered would be that we do eat into that to the extent of about 23,500. But the reserves are there for a reason. The policy that we have for our reserves is there for a reason. We have not had a proposal from the RFO to change our reserves policy. So our reserves policy is what our reserves policy is, and we have sufficient reserves to meet that policy. In terms of the savings target specifically, so a number of members, myself included, were very much against the level of the increase of the preset last year. One of the things that was included as part of the resolutions last year was the delivery of this savings, efficiency and savings review, so that we could incorporate it into the budget this year. That has not been delivered. Now, we can go into the reasons for that, but the fact is it was a resolution of this council that has not been delivered. And therefore, we can either say it's not been delivered, so we assume there are no savings, or we say we can see ourselves just by looking at some of the things that we're doing as a council, that there are opportunities there, and we can task the clerk to deliver those savings, not necessarily by March, although we do expect to see a report by March, but he's got the whole of next year to deliver the savings from the budget, so to meet that target of savings over the course of next year. And then the final point I'd like to make, and this is building a little bit on what Councillor Fage said around how we've grown as a town. The proposal is 7.5% increase per bandy property. It's actually over 10% increase to our budget. Over 10%. That is not a small increase. Inflation is half of that. So we are, without necessarily delivering a lot of extra benefit for our residents, asking them to pay a lot more for what we do. And we need to rein that in. We need, just because we don't have a cap, as Councillor Strawn said, we shouldn't be abusing that privilege. We need to do what is right for the residents of this town, and as they have all done, tighten our belts a bit and make sure that we do the right thing. So please do support the recommendation of Fngp. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask for a recorded vote, please?
Yes, fine. Okay. Do I have a seconder for recorded vote? Thank you. Okay, in which case I will go around the table. So the question is, all those in favour of an increase of 7.5% to Band D, which is the recommendation on the report we have before us today. So it's either aye or no. So I'll start with Councillor North.
No.
Councillor Pullinger.
Aye.
Councillor Knight.
Aye.
Councillor Thomas.
Aye.
Councillor Ramsey.
No.
Councillor Foster.
No.
Councillor Fage.
Aye.
Councillor Strawn.
Aye.
Councillor Alban.
No.
Councillor Brown.
Aye.
Councillor Bond.
Aye.
And I'm no. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 no's. So the ayes win by 7 votes to 5. So we have accepted the finance and general purposes recommendation of 7.5%. So I'm now moving on the agenda to planning applications. The first one is 1 Holly Close, 2-storey side and rear extension. Comments, please.
No objection, subject to neighbours.
Everybody happy with subject to neighbours? 45 Cooks Way.
No comment, subject to neighbours.
Shout if you're not happy. 3 Tate Drive.
Same again, subject to neighbours.
Now we have land to the east of Saxon Drive, the application for a travelling show people site. Councillor Pullinger, please.
Thank you. So councillors may be aware that this application originally came to council in 2017 as a regulation 3 application, which was granted. But that permission has now expired, hence presumably why it is coming forward again. I do have some concerns about this application, primarily around the fact that this latest version of the application seems to take very little heed or notice of the fact that there has been a significant development of 200 houses built between Saxon Drive and where this development is proposed to go since the original application. In the original permission that was granted, there were a large number of conditions applied by Central Bedfordshire, such as the site must be used by travelling show people, the only vehicles or fairground equipment allowed to be stored there must belong to the occupiers, a limit on the number of caravans on site. There was requirements for a landscaping scheme and maintenance of that for at least 5 years, requirements around drainage, that it had to be completed before it was occupied, that the road leading up to it should be properly surfaced. There was a requirement around archaeology, and also limits on the times that works could be done on machinery, limiting it to 7 p.m. Or 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 9 till 5 on Saturday, Sundays and bank holidays, and a thing around a lighting scheme, all of which I think absolutely essential should this application go ahead. A couple of specific points on that as well. I think drainage in particular, with there now being a neighbouring occupied site, then it needs to be clear that the drainage from this site wouldn't go onto the orchard sample. So I'm mindful that it's had planning application consent before, and therefore it's likely that it would be looked upon relatively favourably again. So I think we probably ought to object unless the necessary conditions are put in place. So essentially, I would suggest that those conditions should be all of the conditions that were included within the decision notice from the 2017 application. In addition, that the landscaping and screening needs to ensure that the visible amenity of residents of Orchard Chase in particular is not impacted. And in addition, because the road now runs through a housing estate, or the access will run through the housing estate, that there should be no heavy goods vehicle movements outside of the hours of 7 AM and 10 PM, say. And finally, I'm led to believe that the residents that have already moved on to the Orchard Chase estate haven't actually been consulted, probably an oversight from the officers with them being new properties. But I think we need to make the point as well that those residents need to be proactively consulted prior to any decision being made. Thank you.
Before I ask for a seconder, you mentioned the landscaping and to be maintained for at least 5 years in the original application. I would suggest that it should be maintained in perpetuity, particularly because of the large structures they're going to have there for maintaining their vehicles. And we all know that it's very easy for people to knock down trees after a few years.
I mean, I'm happy to include that. I don't know whether there's any constraints on what conditions they can put on and whether there's a limit on what they can actually make as a condition, but I certainly agree that's what we should hope will be happening. I think the reason for 5 years is because after 5 years, they'll be established to not die essentially, and therefore retain the screening. But yeah, I take on your point and I'll accept that.
Thank you. So do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Alban, you wanted to come in? Sorry, I didn't see you, Councillor Strawn.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been said. It was actually longer ago than 2017 when it came here, I think, because I remember chairing the meeting and there were large numbers of public here. And one of the things that was raised was from somebody who was had one of the Stratton Park industrial units, and that's around restrictions on activity. So what I would like to ensure, and it may be that it is the same, but there are restrictions on activity in the Stratton Park industrial units themselves for the benefit of nearby residents. So I would like to see ensured that the restrictions on workshop activities, for want of a better phrase, on the proposed development are not any less than those that apply to the industrial units already in place.
Okay. I'll come to Councillor Foster in a moment. Councillor Strawn.
Perhaps a bit of qualification from Councillor Pullinger with regard to his proposal, because I think he said he was objecting to it unless, would it not be more positive to support it provided that these conditions are on there? I think that would actually be with respect, a better proposal, because it's then we're being constructive rather than just negative, because it turns it round if that is the intention. And I think that the history of this is that it would probably be granted. So My personal preference would be to support it, provided that these conditions are imposed rather than object, because we've all seen the number of times we've been overturned as a council. So I think
if I may,
yeah.
I think the right wording would be not to support, but to not object, subject to the following conditions.
Okay.
A change in the proposal.
Sorry. Sorry.
Is that a change? Is that actually a change to the proposal or not?
It's semantics, I think, in my mind, but
depends how central beds view it. But
Councillor Knight, are you happy to? Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Foster, please? Mark Foster.
Thank you very much. I'm sort of, how can I word this? In terms of the application, I'm not going to express any particular views at this particular meeting. What I have decided, though, as a ward councillor, is that this particular application should be dealt with by DMC so that it gets the full consideration of that committee, and that residents also get another opportunity, should they so wish, to contribute to the discussion one way or the other. As I say, I have no axe to grind. I've got no views one way or the other specifically, but I think it's absolutely right that residents are heard on this one because of the location and because of the sort of nature of it. So if anyone viewing this takes the view that I've got a view one way or the other, that's not the case. I think it's important that DMC view it. So I will be calling in this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Foster. Any more comments from anybody? So I'm not sure I can cover absolutely everything, but shout if I've missed things out. So we're not objecting, subject to various conditions being met. Landscaping, and we're going to ask that it should be in perpetuity, if we can get away with that. That the road should be properly surfaced so that there's no mud coming through into the housing estate. Restrictions on work as per in the previous applications, 7 PM to 7 AM. Drainage is key, particularly with the 236 houses. We have to have regard to the visual amenity of our Orchard Chase residents. And I think it was added by Councillor Alban that we should look at the work times for Stratton Business Park and make sure that they're in line, but we can ask that they should be in line with that. And, sorry?
I think Councillor Alban actually was a bit stronger in what he said. He said the conditions are applied.
Well, my intention was that the times that the Stratton Park industrial units have to abide by, that they should be the same for this development.
Yeah, but we don't know what they are.
We don't know.
No, okay. Councillor Pullinger.
So just on that point, I think the wording I would use would be as the previous application, but no less strict than the Stratton Way Industrial Estate.
That covers it, I think, very well. I'm just writing all this down so we can make sure we get things right. And then I think the last thing was that residents on Orchard Chase should be consulted because we understand they haven't been yet. Have I missed anything out? No? Okay. So all those in favour of not objecting subject to? Okay. Any objections to that motion? Any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, and of course Councillor Bond doesn't vote. So I'm moving on to 15 Hazel Walk, first floor extension.
Propose no objection, subject to neighbours.
Thank you. Planning appeal for 17 Banks Road.
Note it.
Sorry?
Note it.
Note it. Anybody got any other comment? No, okay, so we're noting that. Works to trees, 41 Wharf Mews. Any comments?
Note it.
Note it again. Okay, well, that's the end of the planning. We have no items for information. Does any member of the public wish to speak? Do you wish to speak again?
I think it was a straw pile once our residents high up on this, would be lack of medical and dental facilities. And I'm extremely concerned that practice managers from both services haven't got them. I'll come to you to tell you what their plans are. So I don't know what we can do about it, but I think it's very worrying. Is there anything the council can do? I know you've advised me twice. It's just not right. It affects every resident.
Well, off the top, I think the best we can do is to try and go up a level and write to whether it's the clinical commissioning groups still or whatever the next tier up is. Did you want to say something?
That's okay, Mayor, yeah. I think actually, my personal view is before we do that, and I think it's the right direction to go, I often find that letters don't necessarily always travel well, and that actually some personal communication might well lend itself better. So perhaps one of the suggestions might be if I either myself or Karim personally extend an invitation in the sense of go and visit the surgeries, talk to the practice managers, talk to the senior partners, and just try to bottom out the reason why, for some reason, people aren't giving a sense of coming to the table. And let's try and explore that. And if that doesn't work, then we should escalate it further, my personal view.
So we'll try and take that forward, Mr. Reynolds.
The other thing is, has anybody heard about garden refuse collection? Normally starts in February. Central Beds discontinued it, variety of reasons. It is an important service, especially to residents who don't have cars, can't get to the garden pit. So, as I say, normally they make announcements around about this time of year to say we're going to start again in February.
I haven't seen an announcement. I don't know whether anybody knows. Yes? Yeah.
Thank you. Just to say that we will be following up on that action because we do routinely say that we're in contact with CBC around particularly the garden bags, the sacks, refuse point. So we will follow up on that.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah.
I'm just asking just for clarification on Sean. Can you update us? Is there an issue connected to sack deliveries, etc., that you're aware of?
Thank you. We administrators here at the office have been in contact with Central Bedfordshire Council. They have said that regrettably they will be ceasing to deliver garden waste, food waste bags and recycling bags to the council, and will take up the service themselves to deliver individually to members of the public. So they are calling for members of the public to ring them directly rather than come to collect from our offices.
That's outrageous because they're trying to stop people using those services by making it more difficult. I'm sorry, but that's my immediate reaction to that.
We have had, there's been a number of occasions this year where we have had to put in multiple orders because the orders have just not been forthcoming in some of those products. In fact, they ceased delivering garden bags to us. It was probably May of this year.
Okay, Councillor Bond, then Councillor Ramsey.
If the town council can write to me officially by email, I will follow it up.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
I understand when Central Beds took over the job centre that they were going to do that sort of thing there, that people would be able to go to the job centre and collect refuse bags. Has that now stopped as well? Because that is Central Beds property, isn't it? So they should.
I don't think that ever started. I think it's always been here.
You'll notice I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's a bit of a surprise to all of us around the table, and it's not a welcome surprise. It's something we should be able to do for our residents, and it's worked very well, actually, ever since we took on this building in 2006, because we've always had, when we took on the building, we had points of presence here, as they were called, for both Mid Beds Council and the County Council, and that was taken over by Central Beds, and they decided to take other services to the job centre, but somehow we still got left with the waste.
This is connected with the fact that we've now got green garden wheelie bins and they feel we don't now need the orange sacks or?
Yeah, they're trying to stop people using orange sacks, green bags, but I don't understand about the food waste, because without those, will the food waste get recycled?
Well, we usually have a ticket put on the bin, don't we, that we can put on the bin and ask for more bags.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Yeah, okay, well, if there's a formal email to Councillor Bond, he'll follow it up, so perhaps somebody can do that. Go on, do you want to speak?
And one last comment was, as I understand it, Central Beds were concerned about the volume of usage for our area. So I won't pass any further comments.
The volume of usage, meaning that we're using too many of those things. Okay. I think we need to ask them in 3 months' time, if this goes ahead, whether there's been more or less recycling over that period. Okay, I don't think there's anything else to discuss, so I declare the meeting closed. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Madam.